Your best salesperson just posted a record quarter. Numbers nobody on the team has ever hit before. And here's a prediction you can make with almost no knowledge of that person, their skill, or their effort. Next quarter, they will probably do worse. Not because they'll get complacent, not because they'll coast on the win, because of a statistical trap that has been quietly wrecking managers' judgment for decades. And it has a name most people have never heard: regression to the mean. Here's the underlying mechanism. And it's simpler than it sounds. Almost no performance in the real world is pure skill, with zero noise attached to it. A salesperson's quarter depends on skill, sure, but it also depends on which accounts happen to be ready to buy this quarter, whether a competitor stumbled, whether a champion inside the client company got promoted at the right moment, timing, weather, mood, 100 small variables nobody controls. Skill sets a true average level of performance for that person. Luck, good and bad, pushes any individual result above or below that true average, in either direction, essentially at random. Now think about what it means when you observe an unusually extreme result. A record quarter is, almost by definition, a case where the luck component landed unusually favorably on top of the skill component. Next quarter, that skill is still there, but there's no reason to expect the luck to land favorably again in the same direction. The most likely outcome is a result closer to that person's true average, not because anything changed, because extreme results, by their nature, are rare, and rare things don't repeat back to back very often. The same logic runs in reverse. For an unusually bad quarter, it too tends to be followed by something closer to normal, this time an improvement. It helps to picture this with something more visual than sales numbers. Imagine flipping a weighted coin that's genuinely biased toward heads. Say it lands heads most of the time, but not every time. Flip it in bunches of 10, over and over, and every so often you'll get a bunch that comes up heads on nearly every flip. That streak wasn't a sign the coin suddenly got more biased. The coin didn't change at all. It was always the same coin. What changed was that, this particular time, a run of good luck stacked on top of the coin's fixed tendency. Flip it again in bunches of 10, and that particular bunch will almost certainly come back down closer to the coin's real, long-run rate, not because anything about the coin shifted, but because an extreme streak was always going to be a rare event, and rare events don't happen back-to-back very often by simple probability. A person's performance isn't a coin flip. Obviously, skill is real, effort is real, and neither is fixed, the way a coin's bias is fixed. But there's a noise component riding on top of the skill component in almost every human performance metric, and that noise component behaves exactly like the streak. It doesn't repeat itself on command. This sounds almost too simple to matter, which is exactly why it fools smart people so reliably, including some of the smartest people who've ever studied human judgment. The psychologist Daniel Kahneman ran into this directly, in a setting about as far from a sales floor as you can get: flight training in the Israeli Air Force. Flight instructors had a strong, confident belief about what worked. Praise a pilot after a great landing, and their next landing tended to be worse. Criticize a pilot after a rough landing, and their next one tended to be better. To the instructors, the conclusion was obvious and reinforced every single time they tested it in real life. Criticism works. Praise backfires. Be tough on people if you want them to improve. It's a completely reasonable sounding theory built on completely real, repeatedly observed data. It was also wrong, and the reason it was wrong is the exact mechanism we just walked through. A great landing is, almost by definition, an unusually good result, some skill, plus a favorable slice of luck in wind, timing, and execution that day. The next landing was always going to tend back toward that pilot's normal level, regardless of what the instructor said in between. Same story with a bad landing, unusually bad, and due to swing back up on its own. The instructors weren't wrong about what they observed, they were wrong about what caused it. They gave credit or blame to their own feedback for something that pure statistics already fully explained, with no need for praise or criticism to be doing anything at all. What makes this such a durable trap is that it doesn't just fool people once and then get corrected the way most misunderstandings do once someone points out the flaw. It re-fools people every single time the pattern repeats, because the pattern is genuinely, reliably real. It's the explanation attached to it that's wrong. The instructors weren't imagining the correlation between praise and a subsequent dip, or between criticism and a subsequent improvement. That correlation was completely real and completely repeatable, precisely because regression to the mean is itself a reliable statistical phenomenon, not a one-off fluke. So the false lesson gets reinforced by real, consistent evidence every time, which is exactly what makes it so much harder to shake than an ordinary mistaken belief. Most bad theories eventually collapse under their own inconsistent results. This one doesn't, because the underlying pattern it's misinterpreting never stops showing up. Now hold that up against a manager's actual day-to-day life, because the exact same illusion is running constantly, just wearing different clothes. A manager praises the team after a huge standout win. The next month's results are quieter, more ordinary. The manager concludes the praise made the team complacent, made them ease off, and quietly resolves to praise less next time. A manager comes down hard on a team after a rough quarter. The next quarter improves. The manager concludes that pressure and criticism are what actually get results, and files that away as a leadership lesson to repeat. In both cases, the manager may be watching pure regression to the mean unfold and mistaking it for the effect of their own management style. That's not a small error. It's the kind of error that can quietly reshape how someone leads for years, built entirely on a coincidence of timing that had nothing to do with their words. Think about how that error compounds once it becomes a personal management philosophy, rather than a one-time misjudgment. A manager who concludes, early in their career, that toughness produces results and warmth produces slacking, doesn't just quietly hold that belief in the abstract. They start applying it as a rule across every team they ever run, on every future star performer, and every future rough quarter. And every single time an extreme result reverts back toward normal afterward, which it will, reliably, because that's just what extreme results do. It reads to them as fresh confirmation that the rule works. The belief gets more entrenched with each cycle, not less, even though nothing about it was ever actually tested against a real alternative. Nobody ran the version where the tough manager praised generously instead, on the exact same team, in the exact same quarter, to see what would have happened. That comparison never exists. All that exists is one path taken and a result that would very likely have reverted either way. But here's the part that goes further than most people expect once they've grasped the basic idea, and it's where this stops being a curiosity about flight instructors and starts being something that reaches into how your whole organization evaluates people. The same trap doesn't just distort what managers conclude about their own feedback. It distorts the underlying baseline used to judge someone's normal performance in the first place. Say a talented employee delivers one genuinely dazzling project, the kind of result that gets them noticed, maybe gets mentioned in a leadership meeting, becomes the story people tell about them. If that one spectacular result quietly becomes the mental benchmark for what normal looks like from this person, then every ordinary, even genuinely solid project that comes after it starts to look like a decline. The employee hasn't gotten worse. Nothing about their actual output has changed. What changed is that the anchor point used to judge them got set at an outlier instead of at their true average, and now regular good work reads as disappointing by comparison. That's a genuinely unfair position to put a good employee in, and it happens constantly, silently, without anyone framing it as a statistics problem. It just feels like they used to be sharper, or they've lost a step. It gets worse once you notice how this baseline problem interacts with the earlier praise and criticism trap, because the two feed each other. The employee's dazzling project becomes the new anchor. Their next several projects, perfectly solid but ordinary by comparison, start reading as decline. The manager, worried about that apparent decline, ratchets up the pressure or the criticism on the theory that something needs correcting. And because performance was always going to hover back around this person's true average regardless of what the manager did, the numbers stabilize, which the manager then reads as proof that the added pressure worked, when really the decline was never a decline at all, just an outlier being misread as the new floor. One statistical illusion manufactures a problem, and a second statistical illusion manufactures a false solution to it. And the manager walks away, having learned exactly the wrong lesson twice in a row from a situation where nothing about the employee actually changed at any point. There's also a quieter cost to this baseline problem that has nothing to do with numbers at all. It's about how the employee experiences it. Being quietly, persistently compared against your own best ever moment is exhausting in a way that's hard to name from the outside, because nobody ever says it out loud as, "We're holding you to your outlier." It just shows up as a vague, creeping sense that good work isn't landing the way it used to, that the bar keeps moving even though nobody changed it on purpose. Good performers who sense this dynamic sometimes respond by quietly disengaging, not because they've lost ability, but because a standard that was never actually theirs to begin with, one set by a lucky convergence of favorable conditions in a single stretch, starts to feel impossible to satisfy on purpose, only ever met by accident. This is worth pausing on because it's the one piece of this that a review process almost never corrects for on its own. Performance review systems are built to compare recent output against some notion of that person's established level. But if the established level itself was set by an outlier, a record quarter, a dazzling one-off project, the whole comparison is measuring the wrong thing from the start, and no amount of careful scoring downstream fixes an anchor point that was wrong to begin with. So, what do you actually do with this? Practically, the next time a result on your team swings hard in either direction, the discipline isn't to ignore extreme results. They're real, they happened, and they're worth understanding. The discipline is to ask one question before you credit or blame anything for causing them. Was the starting point itself unusually extreme? If your top performer just had a career quarter, or your steadiest team just had an uncharacteristically rough one, treat that single data point as exactly what it is, one observation, sitting at the edge of a distribution that is statistically likely to be followed by something closer to the middle, regardless of what you do next. That doesn't mean your coaching, your praise, your tough conversation did nothing. It means one dramatic swing is weak evidence, on its own, about whether it did anything at all. The way you actually find out is by looking across many cycles, several quarters, several projects, a real trend line, rather than anchoring a whole theory of what works on one dramatic before and after that might just be noise wearing the costume of a lesson. Practically, that means resisting a very specific, very tempting move. Don't set next quarter's target off the back of an outlier quarter, in either direction. A record quarter shouldn't quietly become the new expected baseline going forward, and a disaster quarter shouldn't quietly become the new low bar either. Both distort the same way the flight instructor's expectations got distorted, treating a noisy extreme as if it were a stable new normal. A better habit is to look at a rolling average across several periods before reacting strongly to any single one, and to hold off on attributing a swing to a specific cause, your coaching, a market shift, a personnel change, until you've watched whether the pattern holds up over more than one cycle. If it does hold up across several cycles, you're probably looking at something real. If it snaps back to normal on its own, you were looking at an outlier the whole time, and no explanation was ever needed. There's a genuinely useful reframe hiding inside all of this, and it's worth naming directly. The most dangerous moment for a manager's judgment isn't during an average, uneventful quarter. It's exactly in the aftermath of an extreme one, good or bad, because that's precisely when the pull to construct a tidy causal story is strongest, and precisely when the underlying statistics are most likely to hand you a misleading one for free. The record quarter feels like it deserves an explanation. The math says sometimes it doesn't need one beyond an unusually good set of things happen to land in the same 3 months. Sitting with that discomfort, instead of rushing to a theory, is the actual skill here. My own honest take on why this trap outlasts so many other management fads is that it flatters the person telling the story. I was tough and results improved, or I praised generously and results kept coming, is a much more satisfying narrative to tell yourself and to tell a room full of other executives than an extreme number happened to occur, and then, unrelated to anything I did, it moved back toward normal. One story makes you the cause of the outcome, the other makes you a bystander to arithmetic. Given the choice between a story where you're the hero and a story where you're irrelevant, most people, most of the time, are going to reach for the first one, not out of dishonesty, but because it's the more natural read of ambiguous evidence, and nobody's actively checking the math in the moment a good story presents itself. This doesn't mean feedback doesn't matter, obviously it does, and pretending otherwise would be its own kind of overcorrection. It means the evidence bar for concluding a specific feedback style caused a specific swing needs to be higher than "it happened once, right after I said something." A pattern that holds across many different people, many different starting points, and many different cycles is real evidence. A single dramatic swing following a single dramatic starting point is, on its own, close to no evidence at all. It's what would have happened anyway, dressed up as proof of something it never demonstrated. So the next time your star performer turns in a career quarter, enjoy it. Credit the real skill that's genuinely there, and don't be surprised, and definitely don't panic, when the next one looks more ordinary. It's not a decline. It's the average reasserting itself, exactly the way it always does, exactly the way it did in a training program half a century ago that taught the wrong lesson to a room full of very sharp people. If this kind of thing is useful to you, hit follow. There's another one coming next week.